Now, may I introduce Molly Boulding from our research team. Molly has completed our research on this subject, having joined the company relatively recently. It's her first research project, and those of you who've seen it will know it's already marvellous, so well done, Molly. But I'm just before you take us through the research, just to sort of start a question, which is a kind of funny one. Why should we bother? The world is changing so fast. Companies are changing, technology is changing, markets are changing. Surely we just need to react to what we're seeing rather than this kind of long-term planning approach. Should we bother?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a great question. Hello, everyone. Lovely to meet you. I think there's 3 points really that I'd want to say in response to the question of why bother with succession. So our first one is that our present and future are ever changing. So there are major technological innovations, as you say, arriving every few months, and with the accompanying disruptions to economic and social convention. Thus, the strategy of today needs to match the potential of the future, and our people are a huge part of that. The second reason is the ever-strong need for governance. Between requirements and customer expectations, companies are under more scrutiny than ever, and that brings with it new questions about transparency and fairness and these kinds of processes. And finally, there's also a growing recognition that people need and want more from work. So creating developmental environments for employees that reflect both employee aspirations and changing societal expectations of work. Succession has the kind of key to all of those. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so yes, hello everyone, my name is Molly. I'm the research executive at CRF. As John said, I only started recently, so this is my first report, but it's lovely to be here talking with you all. So I'm going to start by saying, sort of in response to that question really, that despite succession management's potential to support companies to face these issues, technological change and so on, only 55% of respondents to our survey said that they have a formal succession management process, and 12.5% said they had no process whatsoever. So what's the hesitation? Well, for some, as John said, it's doubting the necessity of what can be perceived as an outdated technique. For others, it's a question of volatility. With high turnover, low retention, strategic change, technological innovation, it can seem pointless to write up a plan, only to have to rewrite it 3 months later. Some question the necessity of investing in identifying and developing people full stop, because they assume that they will eventually leave the organization and take that value with them. When time and money for development opportunities are at a premium, businesses are going to want to choose the most effective recipients for that investment. So, taken at face value, they can seem like compelling arguments. However, I always like to fall back on a quote from Eisenhower that was given by an interviewee, which is that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. He was talking about battle, fair, but not HR. But I think the principle is sound. The piece of paper with the plan on it is less the valuable outcome than the investment in the time spent thinking about the development and investment in ways of thinking about people, purposes, and potential futures. Studies that I came across during the research suggest that succession management, when done well, can have substantial benefits for all areas and levels of the business. Strong, well-defined participative succession management has been shown to correlate with increased manager tenure, employee satisfaction and performance, and reduced general turnover. It's also generally considered cheaper and faster to fill a role with an internal candidate, and that person can get up to speed quicker. However, before I go on, I want to clarify a few kind of terms, specifics, and so on, make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, fabulous. So this is my timeline. There is a full version of this in the back of the report, but I just want to clarify a few bits from the history as we go. So succession management is a practice that originates from the leadership theories of the 1840s. I didn't go that far back in the report, don't worry. In the 1970s, it evolved into what was then called executive continuity, then into the replacement planning principles of the 1980s, succession planning in the 1990s, and then into succession management as we recognize it today in the early 2000s. Over time, it's become more holistic and further integrated into general talent management. Succession management in this report is defined as the holistic system of identification and development of internal talent at all levels and in all areas of the business, accelerating those aligned with business-critical roles of all kinds, using a combination of strategies like role-based planning or talent pools. We recognize this is also sometimes aligned with internal resourcing frameworks like internal job posting, or external resourcing frameworks like shadow succession. So, what are the purposes of succession management? Succession management, in all of its names, is essentially a continuity process. It's an internal process and a governance requirement, which serves as a way to prevent risk to business continuity by ensuring that roles are filled and that the current strategy isn't endangered by the loss of any one particular person. In short, it's designed to keep things ticking over. However, this doesn't always serve the business's best interests. Sometimes the success of your strategy requires stability and continuity, and sometimes it requires radical change. More often than not, you'll be looking for a combination of these at different times or within different levels or areas of the business. How do you manage this? Well, by asking what the purposes of succession management are, generally, and with respect to your organization's specific needs. I was going to illustrate this with the Disney example, but that one's already been taken, so I'm also going to pick on my Unilever example. It's a great example of a business with the size, scale, people, and resources to conduct thorough and effective succession practices, but the announcement of CEO Alan Jope's departure after only 5 years in post, and the announcement in September 2022 that the search for his replacement would consider both internal and external candidates, suggested they did not have a clear succession plan for his replacement. The question that Unilever and Disney are debating internally is one that is central to the question of succession management. What is the purpose of our process? Do we want more of the same, or do we want something different? And once you understand these purposes, you can then tailor them to your organization and think about how success is best achieved. We identify several purposes of succession management in the report. The first purpose is risk management. The second purpose is governance, and the third purpose is development. Depending on the purposes of succession management for your organization, its structure and features might vary significantly, and you might want to accommodate more than one purpose, each with a greater or lesser focus at any given time. The purposes that are most relevant to your organization will be affected by your leadership demands, how dynamic your market is, and they might change over time as well. So, for example, a large organization facing requirements from a board might focus mostly on a governance purpose, which would potentially lead it to have features like linear role-based planning, greater transparency of process, and critical role selection criteria that favor leadership, safety, and technical risk. Meanwhile, an organization with a mostly development-focused approach might use features like talent pools with whole cohort skills assessments, factors that increase vertical, lateral, and geographical mobility, and a system that is open to greater input from employees about their strengths, weaknesses, and career interests. Now, most organizations will employ more than one methodology, addressing more than one purpose, and use a combination of features, for example, talent pools at the lower level and linear plans at the top. We'll be exploring some of the differences between approaches to succession at different levels of the business later in the day with Jessica Foster and Cindy Davis. Also in the report, we identify 5 themes of the research which run throughout the different purposes. There we go. These themes help to optimize your process, and we provide insights from case studies to think about potential innovations in the field as well. So our first theme is that effective succession management is aligned to business strategy and supported by culture. Our second theme is that it is an integrated talent management process. Our third theme is that it's thoughtfully transparent, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means in a minute. The fourth theme is that it's evidence-based, and the fifth theme is that it is participative and employee-centered. And again, I'll define that in a second. But let's start with the first one. So the first theme is that it is aligned to business strategy and supported by culture. Now, what this means is that there should be a clear connection between business strategy and succession management priorities. Now, for context, around 35% of survey respondents said that this was not the case in their company. So to avoid that, you'll want to be asking your organizations questions like, are we clear about what our business strategy means for skills and leadership capabilities? And do our processes for succession prioritize those capabilities? This will then manifest in your selection criteria for critical roles, your skills gap assessments, the level of buy-in needed from senior leaders, and so on. You may also want to consider extending the business planning horizon. Just under 90% of survey respondents said that their succession plans extend less than 5 years ahead, and 95% said that their succession plans, their business planning horizon extends less than 5 years ahead, and 95% said that their succession plans also extend less than 5 years ahead. Now, previous research has suggested that as much as a 10-year horizon can be useful for assessing skills gaps for senior leadership roles, but our survey data suggests that most organizations are only planning for 2. Nice visual of that. So to provide an example of why extending this horizon can be useful, I'm going to turn to Shell. Shell are currently facing enormous demands from the energy transition, providing a great example of how making practical decisions today can help to reach tomorrow's strategic goals. As the energy sector moves away from fossil fuels and towards greener energy, Shell is having to rethink how they develop talent. They work to a 5-year cycle and anticipate that the energy transition will require upskilling and reskilling most of the workforce. Investing in technology will help get insight into current skills and adjacencies and allow people to be matched to opportunities in a new way, looking for existing skills that could potentially be transferred to new roles and requirements. So, our second theme is that it is an integrated talent management process. So what this means is that you will need to develop a clearly articulated talent and succession philosophy and accompanying principles, which are then actively endorsed and supported by senior management. You will need to agree on clear terminology and definitions for your succession management processes in order to create a common language for talent throughout the organization. At WD-40 company, there is an explicit link between succession specifically, and talent generally. As their CHRO explained to me, the premise is that not everyone will be CEO, but how awesome would it be for our business if more people could think about the entire enterprise the way the CEO has to. To achieve this, they ensure there is clear communication between learning and development and talent's succession priorities. So, our third theme is this: it is thoughtfully transparent. Now, transparency is one of the major considerations of succession processes. To tell people or not to tell people, and how much to tell them. It's also a topic that seems to evenly divide practitioners. 43% of our survey respondents said that their organization informs individuals who are chosen for plans of their status on those plans, and 43% do not. So what do? Our answer is thoughtful transparency. Now, thoughtful transparency is a new CRF term. It denotes a framework of judgments where the benefits of transparency are weighed against any potential drawbacks relative to a particular business circumstance. Now, this isn't a pre-existing framework or a process. It's just a new mindset, a way of thinking about transparency, one that will be informed by your organization's particular circumstances. This means weighing the benefits and drawbacks of transparency of process, so how you choose people, and the transparency of outcome, who you choose and what happens to them after they've been chosen, in order to decide how much you want to share. It will also require you to think about the principles and culture that underpin these decisions, and whether your leaders are prepared, in terms of awareness, communication skills, and so on, to answer questions about how transparent you have decided to be. Now, I'd like to take a quick poll of the audience. We're going to think about how transparent your organizations are. So there will be 4 options. You'll be able to indicate whether your organization is transparent about the process, so how people are chosen, whether you're transparent about the outcomes, who gets chosen and what happens to them, both or neither, and it'd be really interesting just to get a bit of a sweep of the room. So I'll wait for that to get set up. There'll be a Mentimeter here. So if you head to this website and type in this code, you'll be able to vote for one of the 4 options. And we'll be able to see it on the screen. It is anonymous, don't worry. It's at the top there, at the very top of the screen. Hopefully you can read it. No, it's a bit small. I'll stand out of the way. Okay, so I'll give it a couple minutes. Okay. Oh. Okay. Clear winner so far. Everyone had a chance to vote? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Let's just let that finish moving around. Interesting, very interesting. Okay, so that is about half the room says neither, not transparent about either. That is very interesting because if we switch over to the poll that we took on LinkedIn last week, because we were curious what that audience would think as well, neither also won there, which is really interesting. So potentially starting quite an important conversation about this transparency and why it's so important. And I think more about that in the report as well. So if I move on to our next theme. So our next theme is that effective succession management, is evidence-based. So evidence-based practice is a growing consideration for organizations, but there are lots of questions still. For succession, this can mean asking, how can we bring greater objectivity to our assessment and development processes? perhaps by adopting a multi-trait, multi-method approach, supplementing line manager judgments with more objective methods. You will need to build a strong calibration process that includes multiple data points and the views of multiple stakeholders. Why not try offering a new assessment opportunity? Swiss Re began to offer executive succession candidates the opportunity to do personality assessments online and face-to-face in assessment centres, where they would give candidates a debrief, identify skills gaps, and establish individual development plans that would make them ready either for a promotion or for a lateral move. This has been well received and has subsequently been extended to lower levels of the organisation, leading to a positive impact on the number of internal promotions. Our final theme is that effective succession management is participative and employee-centred, and I'm going to give a couple of definitions for this. So participative processes allow people to participate individually and directly in decisions and policies that affect their lives, rather than indirectly through agents like HR. Features of participative processes are that HR invites feedback, they ask clear questions in accessible formats when input is needed, and that it reinterrogates the use of standard frameworks in labels if they are not producing quality outcomes. Employee-centred processes treat employees as the authority on themselves, trusting them to make decisions about their readiness, performance, or willingness to move. One of the ways to support this is to ensure that top-down succession processes and bottom-up career development opportunities are joined up, so that people can visualize the link between their progress and their vertical and lateral moves. Together, these principles put tools into employees' hands to help them further their own careers and the collective goals of the organisation. Transport for London are a great example of an organisation transitioning towards participative practice. The railway industry is facing some serious demographic threats. They've got lower recruitment of under 25s and higher retirement rates. As a result, they're trying to understand the current and future demands and mobilise their existing workforce. And in doing so, they have created a succession system which puts agency for development and movement back into employees' hands. And we're going to discuss TfL's approach in a bit more detail during their session later on. And that is my 5 themes.
Thanks, Molly. That's great. We're going to have some questions from the audience, but before we do, just give us, you said quite a lot, but give us your 2 or 3 takeaways. What would you ask us to remember from that?
Sure, I'll give the highlights of the highlights, if you like. So I've got 3 kind of key points. If you take nothing else away, these would be my 3. So number 1, identify the purposes of your succession management and then consider the features that will complement that approach. 2, consider extending your business planning horizon, setting up effective practices and developing successors for senior roles. It takes a long time, so commit to making the changes even as the role you're planning for evolves. And finally, commit to discussing development actions continuously and especially for more time in talent reviews. More time can end up being spent on who the person is now compared to what they could be with a little help. So yeah, that's my highlights.
Thank you.